Cyril Ramaphosa, who's the president of South Africa now, was the chief negotiator for the ANC during the negotiations for the new
African National Congress.
That's it, yes. The ruling party. And so one member of parliament who was an opposition member of parliament wrote in his memoirs that he was part of the negotiations, and he asked, during this negotiations, he asked Ramaphosa, who's, as I said, the president at the moment, what's your plan for dealing with the whites? To which he said, well, that's easy. You deal with them like boiling a frog alive.
Oh, yeah.
And so water is an example. So we lose about 40, almost 50% of our water as a result of leakages, pipes not being maintained. And the funniest story was in one town, the town didn't have water. And then the municipal manager said, but remember, these pipes were built by the apartheid government, so we should blame the pipes.
What else do you see?
Well, we have the transport system, for example. Our railways have collapsed. The port in Durban, in the eastern part of the country, last I read it was number 405, rated number 405 on a list of 405 ports. So private security in South Africa is currently double the size of the police and the army combined.
Guys, really, if everything Ernst Roets is actually speaking about in this video is true, in this interview he has with Jordan Peterson, bro, I really don't know where South Africa is going. Many times in this interview, I actually think Jordan Peterson was really trying to be polite in trying to tap empathy, with South Africans and all of that, while Ernst Roets kept on really highlighting the whole breakage that South Africa is actually going through at the moment. But I really don't know if probably most of these negative downturns are actually being heard by the ANC, or is this something that is being propagated by the likes of maybe those who want the downfall of ANC? I'm really struggling, because only on my channel alone, if President Ramaphosa or probably some ANC member joins my channel alone, subscribes and reads the comments that actually come out from the mouths of the members of this channel, I really think that they should be taken aback. Or is this a purposeful thing that they've decided not to listen? Or I'm really struggling, because it's really pathetic at how much, he claims many things have really gone wrong. And not just him alone, but even many people have actually listened to recently, actually beginning to now compare the apartheid regime with this regime under this past 30 years under the ANC. It's really astounding for me and astonishing. But let's quickly watch this interview between Jordan Peterson and Ernst Roets. Really break down some of the difficulties, what makes it really difficult to live in South Africa and be a South African today. And share your thoughts, guys. I really want to hear from you guys. Share your thoughts in the comments.
If you look in North America, this is true across the world, places where everyone's poor, there isn't much violence. And places where everyone's rich, there isn't much violence. But places where some people are poor and some people are rich, look the hell out. And South Africa's got that in spades. And so the easiest solution for a politician, especially an unscrupulous one, is to say, well, you see those people over there in that house? They took it from you.
Yep, exactly.
That's what the bloody Bolsheviks said to the peasants. And that worked very effectively. It's like soon there were no people who were rich. Right, none. And then everyone was dead.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you guys have this problem in spades, and the communist influence, it's stronger now than it was 40 years ago?
Yes, but also not. So that's the irony. So that goes to the point about the ship I mentioned. So the ship's headed in the wrong direction. But even though the ship is heading in the wrong direction, the ship is sinking. And what I mean by that is
that's a bad combination.
Yes. So the fact that the ship is sinking has become a bigger problem than the fact that it's headed in the wrong direction. And when I say the ship is sinking, I mean that we just have massive state failure in South Africa. So they want to implement all these very radical policy ideas, and they have become more radical because they talk about a two-phase revolution. Phase one is getting control of the levers of power through democracy. And phase two is once you have power, you need to use the levers of power to implement your socialist ideas, which is where they are now. So we have this plethora of new, very radical leftist policy ideas in South Africa. But on the one hand, they're not really able to implement this because firstly of large scale corruption, but just sheer incompetence within the South African government. So every sphere, everything that the government is supposed to be doing in South Africa, with the exception of tax collection, is collapsing.
Okay, tell us what that looks like. Like, can we start with the stability of the power grid? Like, what's the difference between South Africa now as a modern industrialized state and South Africa, say, 10 years ago?
Yep.
What are you seeing fraying? What does it look like in the streets? And
so we can literally take any example, but let's take power as an example. We started having rolling blackouts maybe a decade ago. And it was you would have an hour without electricity because they're not able to provide electricity for everyone because they didn't build power stations.
Well, providing electricity for everyone turns out to be very difficult.
Yes.
You better stay on top of it.
So you have to build stations, but you also have to maintain them.
Yeah, right.
And neither of these two are happening. So we're about I think the last time I saw at half of the capacity we would have been if the power stations were maintained. So
with a massive population increase.
Yes, exactly. And so that's one part of the problem. But then, so where we are now, initially, it's the metaphor. Let me say this because I think this is relevant. So Cyril Ramaphosa, who's the president of South Africa now, was the chief negotiator for the ANC during the negotiations for the new South
African
Africa.
National Congress.
That's it. Yes, the ruling party. And so one member of parliament who was an opposition member of parliament wrote in his memoirs that he was part of the negotiations, and he asked during this negotiations, he asked Ramaphosa, who's, as I said, the president at the moment, what's your plan for dealing with the whites? To which he said, well, that's easy. You deal with them like boiling a frog alive. The metaphor, putting the frog in the water and just lifting.
Hear that metaphor a lot nowadays in many places.
Yes, just lifting the temperature gradually, and then the frog doesn't jump out. And so the problem with that is we really see that something gets worse. We hear that we have, for example, 1 hour of rolling blackouts, and everyone complains, and that's fine for a week or a month, and then it's 2 hours, and then it becomes 3 hours.
People can adapt, unbelievably well, and the new normal becomes normal so fast. It's just beyond. Like I just remember during COVID, it's like 6 months in, it was like, oh, this is how life is. And you just forget about what it was like before. And part of that's a testament to human adaptability, but it's also an indication of the fragility of even our fundamental expectations. Okay, so there's a level of collapse that is slow enough so people won't rise up and and so
now we have times where there are up to 12 hours a day without electricity.
And that's everywhere. And what people
that
have
you
their own
take
diesel
turns.
generators? How do you deal with that?
We put up solar powers. So people adapt to that, those who can afford it. You have solar power.
Right. So the richer people still have power.
Exactly. Ironically, making the gap between the rich and the poor bigger.
Well, look, as soon as your infrastructure starts to deteriorate, the poor people, like people die from the bottom up, right?
Literally. That's
And
so water is an example. So we lose about 40, almost 50% of our water as a result of leakages, pipes not being maintained. And the funniest story was in one town, the town didn't have water. And then the municipal manager said, but remember, these pipes were built by the apartheid government, so we should blame the pipes. So they're not maintaining the pipes, but the fact that they were built by the previous government means that the pipes are the problem. But not maintaining them.
That's right. Well, that's like failure as indication of our moral virtue. That's what the degrowth people have been doing in the West too. We're not economic failures. We're aiming at degrowth, and man, we're hitting the target.
And so that's a good example where, again, people who are more wealthy can make a plan. They dig boreholes or something.
It's the definition of wealth.
Yes.
You're protected from entropy.
And the people who suffer the most are poor black South Africans who live in townships who die from drinking water that is contaminated.
Right. When the water would be even a more crucial issue than power.
Exactly.
Right. They're integral. What else do you see?
We have the transport system, for example. Our railways have collapsed. The port in Durban, in the eastern part of the country, last I read it was number 405, rated number 405 on a list of 405 ports. So the worst one in the world, which is a big deal because you need a well-functioning port for the economy to function. So that's an example.
For people not to die.
Again, the transport, I mentioned that the fact that the roads aren't maintained. And then we have these practical things like policing is more than just practical. And once again, an example of the more wealthy people who are able to adapt to that. So we
hire private security.
Exactly. So private security in South Africa is currently double the size of the police and the army combined.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, because the police are. I mean, I was in an.
So that's really a reversion to something like it's quasi-feudal society at that point.
Yes, and then what happens again in poorer communities is they resort to some form of mob justice because the police aren't there. There's a guy who rapes people in your community. Everyone knows who he is, and the police doesn't do anything. So the people deal with him themselves. So you get vigilante justice in South Africa. So that, I mean, we can go down the list. The education system. One poll found that 80% or survey, 80% of the schools in South Africa are dysfunctional. I believe the number is the top 200 schools in South Africa, which are predominantly the more wealthy schools, have more distinctions for children who finish high school than the next 6,000 schools combined. So the education system. And so again, everything, one economist who's a very renowned economist in South Africa, he sort of makes a joke, but it's not just a joke. He says people ask him, where should you invest? What should you do to make money? And he says, it's easy. You should look at what is the government supposed to be doing and invest in something that is in the private sphere that is doing that thing. Whether it's electricity generation, whether it's water, whether it's private security, whether it's private education, those are the areas that are.
So, okay, so you're